Hello all, I'm Kel Kidman, and welcome to Breaking on the Daily. And today, we have a bipartisan monoparty group of senators have challenged Biden's $1.9 trillion pandemic stimulus plan. And in this case, unlike a lot of the other cases of monoparty, or as some people more charitable to it would call it bipartisanship, in this case, they're kind of right. Because this $1.9 trillion stimulus bill is kind of full of a bunch of nonsense and really stupid crap. So, first of all, this is the bill that's going to up the checks from $600 to $1,400, and adding on a $1,400 check on top of that. Of course, people are complaining about this because, well, they don't understand how math works, and I find this funny from both ends. You remember back just a week ago or so, it was probably a bit more than a week ago. You saw trends on Twitter being like, oh, $1,400 isn't $2,000. Of course, ignoring the fact that $1,400 plus $600 is $2,000, which, you're getting the same amount of money. If you were asking for $2,600, then say that from the outset, please. It would make everything a lot more clear. But that's not all that's in the bill, and that on its own is quite silly. And they make a good this bipartisan group of senators here, including Joe Manchin, the only Democrat that seems to have a lick of sanity in the Senate, says, well, I don't see how this stimulus check thing that we're doing is going to get anyone employed. And yes, that is true. It's not going to get anyone employed. Because obviously, to anyone with two eyeballs and a functioning prefrontal cortex and pattern recognition ability, would be able to understand that giving people money carte blanche and just allowing all of this sort of checks to go out all at once isn't going to help anything. Obviously, all this money is just being printed. I mean, we already have a huge problem of something like 60% of all the U.S. currency that has ever been printed was printed last year. It's utterly ridiculous levels of inflation. We're getting to hyperinflation territory there, guys. The U.S. dollar, I don't know if it'll kill it, but it's going to damage it certainly. And this is just going to damage it more because we're having another $1.9 trillion stimulus bill a month after we did one of those already. I'm pretty sure the other one was around $1.9 trillion. And that's not all this bill includes. It also includes things like an increase of the minimum wage, which I believe is just the federal minimum wage with federal employees involved, not the minimum wage broad scale, to $15 an hour. An extension of unemployment benefits through September, and I'm pretty sure when we're talking about the unemployment benefits here, I'm pretty sure we're talking about the unemployment benefits that increase people's paychecks when they're not employed as compared to when they're employed. It seems kind of silly. A $20 billion vaccine distribution enhancement, which is fine. I've already given my opinion on vaccine distribution and how it should pretty much be relegated to the free market to do it as efficiently as possible, because that's how that functions. It's how it functions best, especially since this disease is not particularly dangerous to the majority of the populace. It doesn't make sense to have this top-down, very corrupt, very bloated way of doing it, to ensure universality, I presume, is what they're trying to ensure in this case. I don't see the purpose of that given the actual characteristics of COVID as a disease. And they also have a earned income tax credit and child tax credit extension. These are good things. Tax breaks pretty much 100% of the time are good because tax is theft. And also $350 billion in extra funding for terribly run state and local governments, because we need to subsidize other governments. We need to subsidize those things more and more nowadays. I think it's kind of silly. I mean, really, we should be focusing on small business loans. Really, if you wanted to fix the problem of the economic situation we have right now, first of all, Biden, stop doing what you're doing. I mean, we already talked about, you saw me yesterday, talk about how the Keystone Pipeline and all that sort of stuff, how he lost 70,000 jobs in the first day of his presidency, and, he has lots of other policies that are going to contribute to job loss. So stop all of that. And then stop all the lockdowns. Say, hey, all you Democrat governors, all of these people who are using draconian lockdown rules and have curfews or indoor dining bans and that sort of thing. Yeah, stop all of that. And then everyone who has been locked down for almost a year at this point, we're going to give you a check. I don't know how much of a check. I don't know how big it would be. I would say move the funding that you have for checks going to individuals right now who are hurting, but not to the same extent as small businesses are, and say, okay, businesses that are small, and I would say less than 50 people involved, I think would be a fair summation of a small business. Here, you have that money, all right? I think that's fair. I think that's warranted, because though I'm not someone who is in favor of subsidies by and large, and even in this case, this is really a compromise on my part, because I would prefer to just have everyone go free and do nothing. Honestly, I would prefer that. I feel like it would be a better use of money and would not devalue our currency anywhere near to the same degree that we have over the past year with our rapid printing of money, and continuing that trend would not be a good idea. So even in this case, it wouldn't be ideal. But, and of course we have to have these buts, are, in this case, these businesses have been shut down forcibly by the government for almost a year. These businesses have been sitting around, and they have been forcibly locked out of continuing themselves. I mean, it is the equivalent of if the government said to you, okay, no food. You don't get to work for food. You don't get to do anything. All right? There is, under no circumstances can you have food. That is the equivalent of what is happening right now. You can't go work for anything. You can't do anything. That's essentially what it's saying. And it is, in fact, quite literally what the government is saying in a lot of cases. Because the government is telling you, you cannot work. That's what they're telling you. And in any reasonable society, obviously you need to be compensated for that. Because it's similar to something like eminent domain. All right? Eminent domain is one of the most evil things a government can do. It's taking the land of someone and bringing it into some public project when it was previously private property is terrible, leads to revolutions and uprisings of all sorts. It is never a good idea. But obviously sometimes it's necessary. I would argue in this case, the equivalent of eminent domain here, it was not necessary, and it was a simple overreaction. But when it is done, regardless of whether it is warranted or not, there needs to be just compensation under any reasonable, non-communistic perception of the world. That needs to be done. And up till this point, it has not been done for these small businesses. It's something like 50%, a ridiculous number. I think it might be, I might have been overstated that. It might be like a third of small businesses that closed down over this past year are not opening again, are gone, dead in the water. That is a travesty. That is destruction, economic destruction. That has not been seen in America almost ever. It is utterly insane. And we can't just abide. We can't just say, oh, that's fine. We can't just say, oh, the government shouldn't get get all the flack that it absolutely deserves. We can't just sit around and say that, because it's utterly ridiculous. All of that sort of stuff is utterly ridiculous. So that's my opinion on that. But we do have other stories. In this case, SCOTUS has thrown out lawsuits accusing Trump of taking foreign bribes. Now, one of the particular cases, there were multiple cases thrown out, but the most interesting one to me was a case that was originally and initially filed the literal day that Trump got into office. Now, what this case concerns is the emoluments clause, a clause in I believe it's the Constitution, it might be one of the amendments, I don't remember, that essentially states a president or any public official cannot take bribes or cannot take money, from foreign officials, period. And what this particular lawsuit concerned was the fact that Trump is an international businessman. And by the nature of being an international businessman who has billions of dollars in many properties all over the world, he has housed foreign dignitaries. He has housed foreign officials in his hotels. In his hotels in Washington, D.C., in his hotels all over the place, all over the world, because he is an international businessman. And what this lawsuit would fundamentally have done, if it was accepted, and if Trump had actually lost this lawsuit, what it would have ended up doing would have just disqualified any person who has a business that is useful to more people than just within the United States. Because in this case, it is making the argument that lawful business activity that while you're a private citizen or while you're running a company is totally fine to do. It's not illegal to house foreign dignitaries as a private citizen. It is essentially saying that if you take part in lawful activity, that later on, you run for office. You cannot actually run for office because you've engaged in lawful business activity. Can anyone see the problem with that? Can anyone see the problem with that sort of logic? And what if you were to take it to an extreme? Imagine someone like me, an online political commentator, or a political commentator of any stripe, all right? Particularly online, and I'll get to why. Imagine if I or some political commentator has a subscribe star or some sort of payment method. And through that payment method, certain foreigners pay for it. And imagine a foreign dignitary or a foreign official pays for that premium service. Would at that point, those political commentators suddenly become ineligible for public office? Presumably, under the standards of litigation in this case, yes. Utterly insane. Utterly insane. These are not illegal actions. Trump, people, foreign dignitaries, showing up to Trump's hotel in D.C., paying for a room, and staying in that room is not an emolument. Because for all you know, they're going to do that anyway. The reason they're doing it may have nothing to do with the fact that Donald Trump is president. And particularly given the fact that this suit was filed the day that Donald Trump became president, it obviously has nothing to do with Donald Trump being president, because this concerns actions that occurred before he was. So, obviously, this legal theory is utterly insane. Utterly insane. It is an attempt to make legal, lawful business illegal, disqualifying for public office. I mean, if you had to sound more communist, I don't know how you do it. I mean, trying to ban business owners from being in public office at all. I can't imagine a more communist thought or a communist pursuit. I'm not calling these people communists. I'm just saying their lawsuit sounds very communist. But to move on, and into this second section of this Breaking on the Daily, and the bigger, more girthy section, that we're going to be talking about election integrity. Because certain Republican lawmakers, and yes, now I'm going to actually deign to honor them with the term of Republican, because these people do not seem to be part of the Monoparty, as much of state Republican Party is not. I mean, it depends on the state Republican Party, but many aren't. In this case, lots of legislation. Republican state lawmakers are introducing new bills to limit vote by mail, require voter ID, and to clean up dirty voter rolls. This is really, really good. I mean, this is an encouraging sign going into the future, because as I have been harping on for a while since the election, the Republicans have 30 state houses, all right? I have been clamoring to all of the people who watch my videos that you need to focus local. Stop looking at the federal government, because the local government, not only is it going to make you feel much better about the state of our country and where it may be going, it's also exactly where you need to look to actually fix things. Because a voter ID law was never going to happen federally. We have whispers, of course, of legislation coming from the Democrats in the federal government, attempting to limit what voter ID can be done in federal elections. But that's not going to go anywhere. It's simply not going to go anywhere, because state houses, and the state legislators in particular, have wide powers towards conducting their own elections, particularly when it comes to the presidential election. In fact, they are the sole determining factor of who wins the presidential election under the traditional constitutional understanding of such. And so, obviously, if you were going to fix the federal elections, you'd go through the state houses. And this is a good example of that happening. It's happening in Arizona. It's happening in Pennsylvania. Arizona's trying to get a bill to require a notary signature on mail-in ballots. Georgia state Republicans are working to restrict absentee voting. Pennsylvania lawmakers are planning on restricting mail-in ballots after the utterly unconstitutional nonsense that was going on in their election. All of this sort of stuff is going on. All this stuff is going to be fixed in the state houses if it's going to be fixed anywhere. And this is why I say we're not at the point of revolution. Do not go out and commit violence. We are nowhere near the point where that is necessary. The reason being is that though our election system is damaged, and that is essentially undeniable, it is not broken. All right? We have not yet gotten to the point where our vote is worthless. We have not yet gotten to the point where our vote is irreparably damaged and unable to affect the outcome of our elections at all. No, it's simply damage. And that damage can be fixed as quickly as it was made. Maybe a bit slower, since we are going through the legislature, rather than going through friendly lawsuits or the executive branch. But it can still be done. And it still will be done. So, if you live in any of the states that are having problems, go and get your representative on it. All right? Go and do it. And even my most hated branch of government, the courts, a thing which has scorned many on the right as of the last few months, and has scorned me and garnered a good bit of ire from myself over the past few years. Even the courts can move in the right direction, because the Virginia rule, a Virginia rule allowing late ballots, missing postmark, is now illegal. Court has now ruled. Now, you're going to see potentially a number of people on the right claim that this would have changed the election, and you're going to see a lot of sour grapes about that. But in this case, it wouldn't have. The reason being is that this rule, in particular, was actually blocked before the election ever happened, and was simply ruled unconstitutional as of very recent. The same judge, in fact. So this isn't a case of a rule being reversed after the election, never to affect to allow it to affect the previous election and not affect future elections. In fact, it didn't affect the 2020 election at all because it was blocked by the same judge, which is good. It is eminently good. This is a kind of a win for the courts, in fact, because this is the correct decision. It was an utterly ridiculous rule from the Board of Elections in Virginia. Utterly ridiculous, and I'm glad to see that some of the courts remain sane, particularly after the election. Yeah. I very much appreciate this. And this is another thing to show. A lot of state judges and local judges are elected. You know, so in this case, this is an example, once again, of state officials, state elected officials, doing more. I don't actually know if Virginia judges are elected. I imagine it is because that's most of the states in the union, but I could be wrong. But it is an example of state officials doing what needs to be done, because this isn't going to be done from the federal government. Our republic is not dead. It is just damaged. We have the, we might say, parallels to the fall of the Roman Republic. And there are those parallels. I fully accept them, and I see them all over the place. But something important that's missing through a lot of people's overviews of this sort of thing and analysis of the fall of the Roman Republic and its similarities to America today is that the Roman Republic fell because of apathy among the citizenry. It only ever truly fell because people gave up. Because people fell to, well, what might be considered the ancient Roman equivalent of the black pill. So, if you are black pilled, if you are sitting around saying there's nothing we can do, we can't fix an election, we're never going to get our republic back, stop it. Because we can. And I hope that's what I've effectively imparted to you today, and in this last section of Breaking on the Daily today. But, for now, I'll have to leave you here, because this has been Breaking on the Daily, and subscribe for more wherever you are, particularly on BitChute. I quite like that platform. I'm Kel Kidman, and I'm out.